Relax. Breathe. There is no urgency here, no race to fix what you once called broken. You see, the mind clings to labels for failure, heartbreak, loss, as if naming the experience makes it easier to endure. But in doing so, we often miss the beauty hidden in the wreckage. We are so eager to escape our pain that we forget the seed must crack open for the tree to emerge. The storm must tear through the sky before the air feels clean again. And what broke you? Yes. What shattered your illusions, humbled your pride, and made you feel small, may, in fact, be the very thing that brings you to your feet, stronger than ever before. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid suffering. And in doing so, they also avoid transformation. Because suffering is not just an unfortunate detour on the journey of life. It is the very path through which meaning is carved. We imagine that rising means returning to who we used to be, but it doesn't. Rising means becoming someone entirely new. The version of you that survives the breaking is not the same version that was once intact. No, something deeper has been awakened, something unshakable. You might be tempted to say, this broke me. And yes, it did. But have you noticed something else? You are still here. Maybe quieter, maybe more thoughtful, maybe slower to trust. But you are here. The breaking didn't end you, it simply ended who you thought you had to be. It stripped away the illusions, the masks, the borrowed definitions of strength, and what's left, what remains when the dust settles, is the core of who you really are. Something real, something unbreakable. The river does not resist the rocks in its path. It flows, it adapts, it carves. Over time, even the hardest stone softens under the touch of water. In the same way, your soul is not defeated by hardship. It is shaped by it. What felt like drowning is often just the moment before learning to breathe differently. You see, the pain was never meant to punish you. It was meant to awaken you, to call your attention to what you've outgrown, to strip you bare so that you could find yourself again. My goodness. My goodness. So if your heart is heavy with what you've lost, let it be. Let the weight sit with you for a while. You don't have to force healing. You don't need to chase hope. Just stay, just be. Because in this stillness, something begins to shift. What once felt like a wound begins to feel like wisdom. What once caused you pain now becomes the very lesson that guides your rise. Not because you conquered it, but because you allowed it to change you. Don't rush to rebuild. Let the pieces teach you something. Let the silence stretch a little longer. Let the tears fall without shame, because this too is sacred. This too is part of the becoming, and when you do rise, and you will, it won't be in spite of what broke you. It will be because of it. The same fire that burned your plans to the ground also cleared space for something truer, something freer, something more you. There is nothing to fix, nothing to return to, only this moment and the quiet promise it carries, that every fall plants a seed and every breaking makes way for light to enter. So relax. What broke you was never the end. It was the invitation. And your rise It's already unfolding. Not in dramatic gestures or grand moments, but in every breath you take that says, I'm still here. There comes a moment in every life when something shatters. A dream dissolves, a relationship crumbles, a belief that once anchored your identity vanishes. In that moment, we often fall to our knees, whispering the words, why me? And yet that moment, painful as it is not the universe turning its back on you. It is, in fact, the universe placing a key in your hand. The key doesn't unlock the door you expected. It opens a hidden passageway you didn't know existed. What broke you was not meant to crush you, but to lead you somewhere you wouldn't have chosen to walk willingly. It was never a punishment. It was an invitation. We live much of our lives trying to build a fortress of safety. We collect routines, expectations, and familiar identities and cling to them because they offer a sense of control. But the truth is, control is the great illusion. Life isn't something to be managed, it's something to be experienced. And when life wants to evolve you, it often doesn't ask your permission. It shakes you. It dismantles everything you thought was stable. The job you thought you'd retire from disappears. The person you trusted with your whole heart walks away. The path you were so sure of ends in a wall, and you're left, blinking in disbelief, staring at the ruins of what used to be. In that space, it's easy to believe you've been forsaken, that you're a failure, that something inside you must be flawed. But that interpretation only comes from a limited vantage point, the ego, the conditioned self, the one who sees through the lens of what is lost rather than what might be found. What if, instead, you began to see the breaking as a divine disruption? What if the discomfort you feel is not the end of something good, but the unraveling of something false? What if your suffering is a signal not of your weakness, but of your becoming? You see, the soul is not interested in comfort. It is interested in truth. And truth has a peculiar way of arriving, not always with clarity or gentleness, but often with chaos. Because truth doesn't just fit into your old life, it requires a new one. So what breaks you isn't sent to ruin you. It's sent to peel back the layers of who you're not, until who you truly are is all that remains. The walls that fall are not meant to bury you. They're meant to liberate you. It is in our most broken states that the deepest questions arise. Not just what happened, but who am I now? This is the sacred doorway. When the labels fall away and the roles dissolve, there's a raw and terrifying freedom. And within that freedom lies the chance to meet yourself. Not the self you've performed, not the one you've curated for the world's approval, but the self that has been quietly waiting beneath the surface, untouched by the world's noise. The breaking does not create the self, it reveals it. This invitation does not come wrapped in comfort or clarity. It often arrives with trembling hands and sleepless nights. But it is an invitation nonetheless. An invitation to release the life you've outgrown. An invitation to surrender the illusion of control. An invitation to feel, to truly feel, without numbing or running or distracting. And when you accept this invitation, you begin to see what you never saw before. You begin to see that your breaking was not a detour from the path, it was the path. Perhaps for the first time, you understand that vulnerability is not weakness, it's the soil where courage grows. That loss is not absence, it's a space being cleared. that silence is not emptiness, it's presence in its purest form. You begin to see the divine intelligence woven into what felt like chaos. You begin to recognize the gentle hand behind the fierce winds. And you no longer ask, why did this happen to me? Instead, you whisper, what is this here to show me? Those who never break rarely change. They remain comfortably nestled in their routines, unaware that their soul has been quietly dozing off. But those who have been broken, truly broken, know something different. They know what it means to let go. They know what it means to trust what cannot be explained. They know what it feels like to be stripped of everything false until only what is real remains. And in that knowing there is a quiet strength. A strength that doesn't shout or pretend or demand. A strength that simply is. The invitation your breaking extends is to stop resisting and start listening. To stop clinging and start receiving. To see the ashes not as evidence of failure, but as fertile ground. What if the parts of you that felt most torn apart were the exact places light was trying to enter? What if the reason it all fell apart was so you could come together in a new and deeper way? This is not to romanticize pain. Pain hurts, it confuses, it tests every ounce of your faith. But beyond the pain, something sacred stirs, something ancient and knowing, something that whispers, you were never meant to stay small. And perhaps that whisper is the reason everything you built had to fall, because you were building it on a foundation too narrow to hold the vastness of who you truly are. And so the invitation isn't just to rise, it's to rise differently. To rise not by rebuilding the old life, but by becoming someone entirely new. To rise not in spite of what broke you, but because of it. Because what broke you peeled back the surface and revealed the soul. And the soul is where your real life begins. Pain for most of us is something we try to avoid, escape, numb, or forget. We categorize it as the enemy of happiness, the opposite of peace, and we fear its return like we would a shadow in the dark. But what if that understanding is fundamentally backwards? What if pain isn't the destroyer of life's meaning, but the very chisel that carves it? What if the moments that brought you to your knees were not detours from your path, but the shaping of the path itself? We don't want to admit that suffering is part of becoming, but the truth is, it's the only way the soul truly grows. You don't evolve in the comfort of the familiar. You evolve when the floor gives out and there's nowhere to go but within. The identity you once carried, shaped by dreams, relationships, accolades, and roles, feels solid until it's tested. And then, suddenly, all those parts of you that once made sense begin to dissolve. Who are you without the job? Who are you without their approval? Who are you when your name no longer holds weight in the places it used to? The unraveling of identity through pain is disorienting because the ego fights to preserve the mask. But what emerges when the mask finally slips away is not less of you. Suffering has a strange way of silencing all the noise you once thought was important. You stop caring about impressing people. You stop trying to win battles that were never yours to fight. You stop pretending you're okay when you're not. And in that silence, when the noise of ambition and social conditioning fades, you begin to hear the faint heartbeat of something deeper, a voice not shouting for attention, but whispering with wisdom. Pain brings you to the cave within, and while that cave feels cold and lonely at first, you soon discover it's filled with treasures you never knew existed. Treasures like self-compassion, spiritual clarity, resilience, and peace that isn't dependent on circumstance. Most people think identity is built by adding more knowledge, more success, more experiences. But in truth, the most profound identities are formed through subtraction, through loss, through grief, through letting go of the false so that the true can emerge. Every time your heart breaks, it doesn't just ache. It opens. Every time your plans fail, something more alive has a chance to enter. Suffering refines. It doesn't take away your value, it exposes it. Like gold tested in fire, the trials you endure do not destroy you. They burn away what you are not, leaving only the essence of who you are. And yet, it's easy to forget this when the pain is still fresh, when the tears haven't yet dried and the nights still feel endless, when friends don't understand and prayers feel unanswered. But even in that place, even in the agony that seems without purpose, something is quietly happening beneath the surface. Your soul is gathering pieces. Your spirit is recalibrating. You're shedding illusions you didn't know you were carrying. The healing doesn't arrive with fanfare or dramatic breakthroughs. It arrives in the small choices. Choosing to get out of bed. Choosing to breathe through the grief. Choosing to be present with your pain rather than running from it. These quiet moments are the forge where your new identity is formed. There is something sacred about the soul that has suffered and survived. It carries a weight in its silence that no smile can imitate. It has seen the underside of life and didn't run. It stayed. It endured. It witnessed the undoing of everything it once clung to and still chose to keep going. That kind of strength isn't loud. It's not built on motivation or ego. It's built on surrender, the kind of surrender that says, even if I don't understand this, I will remain open. The kind of surrender that trusts there's meaning in the mystery, even if that meaning reveals itself slowly, painfully, quietly. When pain reshapes you, you don't just become tougher, you become deeper. You begin to see people differently. You're not quick to judge anymore because you've tasted what it feels like to break. You don't measure success the way you used to, because now you understand that peace, not applause, is the real prize. You start noticing the little things. A genuine hug, a kind word, the sunlight on your face, and you realize you're not the same person you were before the fall. You've become softer in some ways and stronger in others, more grounded, more alive, more aware of what really matters. You might still carry the scars, but those scars are not signs of failure. They are signatures of transformation, proof that you entered the fire and didn't come out empty. You came out forged, recreated, reborn, and no one can take that away from you, not time, not people, not even memory. Because what suffering gave you was not just pain, it was truth. And truth always leaves a mark. We are taught to associate identity with what we can control, career paths, social labels, achievements. But real identity is born in the moments where control is taken from us, where the ego is stripped of its costumes and the soul must stand naked before the storm. And when that storm passes, and it will, you realize something extraordinary. You're still here, not the same, not unscarred, but undeniably more true. And that truth becomes your strength. It becomes the foundation of a new identity. It doesn't need to prove, it doesn't need to impress, it doesn't need to pretend. It's simply this: it is. The pain didn't just teach you a lesson, it rewrote the entire script. And the person you are becoming, the one rising from the ashes, isn't just wiser. They are more free, because freedom doesn't come from a perfect life. It comes from knowing you can survive an imperfect one and still find beauty in it. It comes from realizing that what once broke you is now the very thing giving your life a depth, a texture, a richness that could never have existed without the break. And in that realization, you begin to see pain not as a curse, but as the sculptor of the soul. There is a stillness that arrives after the storm, not the stillness of emptiness, but of awareness. A silence that doesn't signify nothingness, but an invitation to hear what has always been whispering beneath the surface. When life breaks you, when your plans collapse, when the people you love walk away and the walls you've built fall to dust, there is an instinct to run, to fill the void with noise, distractions, and the desperate search for answers. But if you can resist that urge and simply sit, simply be, you will discover something hidden beneath the chaos, a sacred stillness, and in that stillness, a power you've forgotten. The mind is addicted to movement, to fixing, analyzing, controlling, and seeking. It tells you that silence is dangerous, that being still means being stuck. But that's the lie of a restless ego. The truth is, healing doesn't come through constant motion. It comes through surrender, through quiet, through the willingness to feel what you've spent your whole life avoiding. In that sacred pause, when you finally stop trying to outrun your pain, something begins to rise from within you. A presence, a knowing, a calm that is not attached to any outcome. Most people never reach this place because it's uncomfortable. Stillness brings to the surface everything you've buried. Old wounds, unspoken grief, lingering fears. And so we turn back to noise. Scrolling, talking, working, achieving, anything to avoid hearing our own soul speak. But stillness is not the enemy of growth. It is the space in which growth actually happens. A seed does not grow by rushing toward the sky. It grows silently, unseen, in the darkness beneath the soil. In the same way, your transformation does not begin when things get better. It begins when you stop resisting what is. The paradox is that what you were searching for in all your effort, the peace, the purpose, the clarity, it doesn't live in the world of doing. It lives in being. And to enter that realm, you must become still enough to hear what life is trying to teach you, still enough to feel the breath moving through your body, still enough to sense that you are not your thoughts, not your failures, not your circumstances. You are the one watching it all. The awareness behind the storm. When life breaks you, it strips you of the distractions that once kept you numb. You are forced to look inward, to sit with what is raw, real, and unresolved. And it is there, in the presence of your own brokenness, that you begin to understand what wholeness really means. Not perfection, not getting everything right, but being fully present with all that you are, your fears, your hopes, your disappointments, your desires, without judgment. That presence is not something you earn, it's something you return to. And stillness is the path back. You might feel lost right now, disoriented by the loss of something you thought you couldn't live without. But what if that very loss is leading you to discover a version of yourself that doesn't depend on external validation? A version that doesn't crumble when plans fall apart. This self is not built by effort. It is revealed in rest. In the quiet moments when there's nothing left to perform, prove, or protect. And in those moments, you bring in the wisdom, unconditional, let it come, let it come. The weather's upland, the saddle, the country, the sea, the people, nature. This accelerate this. The world teaches us to act our way out of pain, but the soul teaches us to feel our way through it. And the way through begins with stillness. Stillness is not passive, it is not weakness. It is the most radical act of courage in a world addicted to distraction. To sit with your grief, your uncertainty, your not knowing, without reaching for a solution that no amount of striving can create. And in that stillness, a transformation begins that no amount of striving can create. You start to notice small things, the way the light filters through the trees, the rhythm of your own breathing, the soft ache in your chest that no longer feels unbearable but sacred. These are signs that your soul is waking up, that beneath the surface of your pain, something is taking root, something that doesn't need to be seen to be real, something unshakable. When you embrace stillness, you begin to reclaim your power. Not the kind of power that dominates or controls, but the quiet power of presence. The kind of power that says, I am here, I am enough. I don't need to understand everything to trust this moment. That kind of power doesn't shout, it doesn't need to. It exists in the way you breathe, the way you listen, the way you hold yourself when everything around you is falling apart. You begin to trust that life is not something happening to you, but something unfolding through you. And even the breaking was part of that unfolding. Even the moments that shattered you were invitations to go deeper, to move beyond the surface of your identity and into the eternal truth of who you are. That truth is not found in noise. It is found in the sacred quiet that follows the fall. You don't need to rebuild your life overnight. You don't need to force clarity or rush toward meaning. All you need to do is be still, long enough to feel, long enough to listen, long enough to remember that the power you were searching for outside was always inside you. And the pain that brought you to your knees was not the end. It was the beginning of your return. There is a version of you that only stillness can reveal. a version that does not live in fear, a version that does not chase love or grasp for answers, a version that simply is, whole, rooted, unafraid. You don't find this self in the noise. You find it when you're quiet enough to notice that what broke you did not destroy you. It introduced you to the part of yourself that cannot be broken, and that realization, that quiet knowing, is where your rise begins. Not in doing more, but in becoming more. By doing less. By simply being. By becoming here, deliberately and mentally, alive and active, living. Destruction and creation are not opposites. They are dance partners. They move in rhythm, often indistinguishable from one another in the moment. And when life breaks you, when it tears through the very foundation you built your dreams upon, the instinct is to grieve the loss as if something precious has been stolen. But what if what was taken was never meant to remain? What if the fire that consumed your plans was not there to punish, but to prepare? Sometimes the greatest growth only comes when the ground is cleared, when everything that once stood tall is reduced to ash. And in that ash, in what looks like the end, lies the perfect soil for a new life to take root. One that is truer, freer, and more aligned with who you were always meant to become. We often fear loss because we misunderstand its nature. We think something is being taken from us. But in truth, something is being revealed. Something is being refined. The relationships that ended, the jobs that slipped away, the chapters that closed, each one felt like a collapse. Yet each was creating space, space you would have never willingly made, space that feels empty now but is already being filled by something you cannot yet see. The fire didn't arrive to destroy your life. It came to burn away what no longer serves the deeper purpose of your becoming. Think about a forest after a wildfire. The ground looks barren, the air smells of smoke, the trees are blackened, hollow. And yet, under that quiet devastation, the soil is more fertile than ever. The fire broke what once was, but it also enriched the ground for what is to come. New life doesn't fight its way through the ashes out of defiance. It emerges because it was meant to. Though otherwise than wise, new life tempts. In the same way, you are not rising from your pain out of resistance. You are rising because the very pain you endured has made you ready for the next version of yourself. It's hard to see this when you're still in the smoke, when the flames of heartache or disappointment are still smoldering in your chest. It's hard to imagine that anything good could come from the things that hurt you the most. But healing is not about erasing the memory of the fire. It's about learning how to grow in spite of it, or perhaps because of it. It's about realizing that your suffering didn't just leave you with scars. It left you with the strength you didn't have before, the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself loudly, but moves through the world with quiet certainty. Pain is a purifier. It strips away the superficial. It exposes what's real. And when the fire has passed, you're left with only what matters. You begin to see how much energy you spent on things that were never truly yours, on pleasing others, on performing roles, on chasing approval. The destruction, as painful as it was also a liberation. It freed you from what was fake, shallow, or misaligned. And now, in this new space, there is something strangely beautiful about beginning again. The fear of starting over is real, but so is the possibility that this time you'll build something more honest, something rooted not in what others expect, but in what your soul truly longs for. You don't have to rebuild what was lost. You don't have to recreate the past. You are free now to imagine something entirely new, something that only you can create, because only you have walked through this particular fire. Letting go of what burned is not easy. There's grief in release. There's sorrow in surrender. But clinging to the ashes of your former life won't bring it back. It will only blind you to the life that's waiting to emerge. You must be willing to bless the fire for its destruction and its clarity. You must learn to say thank you, not just for the rise, but for the fall that made the rise possible. And that kind of gratitude doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the soul, from the place in you that knows every ending is a beginning, wearing a different disguise. The fire didn't just leave you with pain, it left you with wisdom. You now know what it feels like to lose and still wake up, to cry and still breathe, to fall apart and still continue. That knowledge, that resilience is part of your new foundation. It's what makes you unshakable. Because when the next storm comes, and it will, you won't fear it in the same way. You'll recognize it as part of the cycle, as part of the rhythm of life. And instead of resisting, you'll allow, you'll trust. You'll remember that even in destruction, something sacred is always being made. You don't need to rush the rebuilding. Let the ground cool. Let the smoke clear. Let your spirit rest. There is no urgency here. Nothing real is ever lost. What's meant for you will always find its way back, sometimes in a different form, sometimes in an unexpected time. But it will return, and when it does, you'll be ready. Not because you've conquered the fire, but because you've walked through it with your eyes open and your heart intact. When you look back one day, you may not remember every detail of what you lost, but you will remember the way you changed, the way you softened, then hardened, then softened again, the way you stopped needing answers and began to live the questions, the way you started showing up for yourself with more tenderness, more presence, more grace. And you will realize that the fire didn't take your life. It gave you back your soul. The world around you may never know what it cost you to rise, but you will. And that knowing will carry you through every future breaking, every future fire, you will no longer fear destruction, because you've seen what follows it. You've seen the green shoots pushing through blackened earth. You've seen what happens when the old burns away. And more importantly, you've seen what remains. Something timeless, rooted, whole. Rising is often misunderstood. We imagine it as a return to former glory, a restoration of the life we once had, the strength we once felt, the clarity we once carried. But the truth is, real rising has nothing to do with returning. It is not about picking up the same pieces and assembling the same puzzle. It is not about becoming who you used to be before the fall. Real rising is a becoming. It is the emergence of someone new, someone forged by fire, shaped by sorrow, and softened by stillness. The version of you that existed before the breaking cannot rise again, because that version is gone, and it's meant to be. In its place grows something deeper, something more whole, something far more beautiful in its raw honesty. When people say you've changed, they often mean it as a warning. But change is not something to fear. It is a sign of life. What doesn't change becomes stagnant. What doesn't evolve begins to decay. So when life breaks you, when it strips you down and leaves you staring into the mirror with nothing left to hold on to, that's not the death of your story. It's the death of your false self. The one who smiled for approval, the one who said yes to avoid conflict, the one who carried the weight of everyone else's expectations without ever questioning why. That version of you may have been strong, but it was not free. And now, after the breaking, you are being invited to become someone who is. This becoming is not immediate. It's slow, uneven, and often invisible. You won't wake up one morning and feel whole. You'll wake up and still feel the ache, the absence, the uncertainty, but something within you will be different. You'll pause longer before reacting. You'll speak more kindly to yourself. You'll recognize familiar pain and no longer run from it. These small shifts are not just healing, they are evolution. The person you are becoming is not defined by the titles you carry or the success you chase. They are defined by presence, awareness, and a quiet kind of strength that only comes from surviving what once threatened to undo you. To become new, you must allow the old to fall away. This means grieving not just people or plans, but identities. You may no longer resonate with the things you once fought for. The dreams that once kept you up at night might now seem distant or foreign. This can feel like a loss, but it's actually an opening, an opportunity to redefine what matters, to ask questions you never dared to ask. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I love when no one is telling me what's valuable? What kind of life feels true, not just impressive? In the silence that follows these questions, the new self begins to take shape. This self is less concerned with appearances and more attuned to essence. It doesn't strive to be liked by everyone. It seeks to be honest with itself. It's not obsessed with productivity. It values peace. It no longer measures worth by how much is achieved, but by how deeply one can feel and still remain open. This is the self that rises not from victory, but from vulnerability, not from achievement, but from alignment. You begin to trust your intuition more. You begin to notice that you don't need to explain your growth to those who only knew the older version of you. You no longer feel obligated to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You no longer tolerate environments that drain your spirit. This is the rising not as a performance, but as a return to your own soul. Not loud, not public, but steady, sacred, and inward. People often want a dramatic comeback, a moment where the world watches and applauds. But the most profound becoming doesn't come with applause. It happens in private, in the choices no one sees, in the moments when you choose to respond with grace rather than resentment, in the nights when you whisper to yourself, "I'm proud of how far I've come," even when no one else is watching. This is the kind of rising that changes you at the core. It doesn't need an audience, because it isn't about performance, it's about truth. You stop needing to prove that you've healed. You stop defending your journey. You stop chasing love that demands your suffering as a price. Because now you know who you are. Not because you read it in a book or heard it in a speech, but because you met yourself in the darkness and didn't look away. You learned how to sit with your pain, how to hold your brokenness without shame, how to laugh again without guilt. You discovered that the version of you that came after the storm is not only strong, but wise, and only soft, but powerful. The becoming never ends. There's no final version, no ultimate destination. Every day you wake up is a new layer, a new depth, a new possibility. What once felt like failure now becomes your foundation. What once made you feel like a victim now becomes your wisdom. What once made you hide now becomes your message. You stop wishing for the past to return. You stop hoping for things to go back to how they were, because now you understand what once was needed to break so that what is could be born. You may carry the memories, but you no longer carry the weight. You may still feel the sting, but you no longer feel the shame. You've made peace with the pain because you've seen what it gave you. It gave you yourself, and in becoming yourself, you become whole. Not because you're perfect, but because you're finally present. Present with your life, present with your truth, present with the mystery of not knowing what's next, but trusting you'll rise again when it comes. You rise not as a return, you rise as a becoming. And who you are now is not a repair of who you were, it is a revelation of who you were always meant to be. A soul unmasked, a spirit made clear, a life that no longer hides from pain but is led by the lessons it carved into your bones. The world may not recognize this version of you yet, but you do. And that's all that matters.